No, I don't have call sheets.
Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get started. It's 2:30, Wednesday, March the 8th, and this is a regular meeting. Are we recording?
Yep.
Of the City of Trinidad Historic Preservation Commission. Thank you guys for being here. We'll go ahead and start with roll call. Please, Chris.
I don't have a call sheet, so. Carlos?
Here.
Derek?
Here.
Elizabeth?
Here.
And Jean?
Here.
And Shirley?
Here. Our first item for business is public comment, and we want to welcome Lindsay, and you'll have to help me with your last name in a moment, but we thought maybe we could do a quick round of introductions so everybody knows who they are, and then we can take, if we have any comments from the public, we can go from there. So maybe we start with staff.
Steve Ruger, City Manager.
Audrey Garrett, City Clerk. Lindsay Fluelling, the History Colorado CLG Coordinator.
Thank you.
Kaylee Williams, Development, the Director of Development Services.
Chris Hall, Planning Administrator.
Oh, Carlos Madrid, Commissioner.
Can you maybe just quickly say kind of how long you've been on the commission and what your background is?
I've been on the commission for what, like 3 months, 4 months, 3-4 months. My background is I used to be a land surveyor with the U.S. Forest Service for quite a number of years. Also did land survey. Did I say land service? I did, didn't I?
I don't know.
Land survey. Jesus. Sorry, I'm like all over the place. Land survey with the U.S. Forest Service for about 8-9 years, and did also land survey with the public sector for another 5 years. Moved down here, and I love historic buildings, love historic preservation. It's a real passion in my heart. I'm a photographer. I'm also a drone pilot, so I have my own business where I do photography, drone photography, and I kind of started, prior to this, I kind of started documenting some of the buildings, the inside of them, as their current status, because a lot of the stuff is changing. Just trying to get examples of what the buildings look like now, and then other photos when they change. The brewery that they're throwing down right now, I was able to get in there, so I have tons of photos of the inside of that thing. So it's pretty well documented, the inside of that. But yeah, that's me.
Thanks, Carlos.
Derek Thomas. I'm a history major, or graduate, and board member. I've been on board for a year and a half now, and I just love history, and I'm particularly excited about our focus on culture this year, so that's...
And I'll just add some, why we have, if you don't mind, the time. So we're doing this outreach event in June, and Derek brought the idea of doing a heritage baseball game to us. And at first I didn't get it. It was like, oh, I don't know. Anyway, since then I've learned a lot about the history of baseball and what it meant to the coal mining camps and to the city. So we just really appreciate that fresh kind of perspective in what we're doing. So give you credit for that. I'm Elizabeth Kelly. I've been on the commission a little over 2 years maybe. And this is really my first full year as the chair. So originally born and raised in the Denver area, almost pre-Lodo, some of that development that occurred there. I lived in Fort Collins for a long time, and I've been here for about 4 years. So, and my professional background is actually in law and social work, in the area of aging and disability, and I serve as the long-term care ombudsman for our region for the Council of Governments.
I'm Jean Delicio, and I've been a music teacher for over 25 years in K through 12, pre-K through 12 vocal music, and I'm from Raton, New Mexico. My heritage is in this area. Go Miners, by the way. I'm still a Trinidadian. My daughter graduated from Trinidad High, and lived here since 2001. I've been on the commission since 2015 when it started, just about 2016, so I've been on the commission for 4 years. This is going on 5. And my husband and I do the New Legends magazine, so we started the history through the tourism department, who commissioned us to do 12 banners of the legendary people in Trinidad based on the Highway of Legends. So we're using that and incorporating that into our event to educate people. I've used them up at Primero School. I had a big event with Primero School my last year teaching there with the Legends banners in my music room, and the principal was very influential in getting all of our music kids to learn about our legends of Los Animas County and Trinidad.
And Gina has helped us to have a little bit of a historical memory about the commission itself, because as you know, a lot of that kind of gets lost or falls through the cracks when you have a turnover in folks. So it's been helpful to have someone who kind of knows some of that background. So
I worked with Wayne Pritchard, and he was the first chair, and Chris Smith was also here, and so I worked with just a few, but it's only been about a 5-year program. So.
yeah.
And I worked with Tara Marshall when we did the original Create Space to Create building. So we have a lot of thanks for Tara Marshall, and that administration was very influential in getting that building, the old Shree building, historically preserved. And I like the word preserved too. So.
Shirley.
My name is Shirley. My last name's also Shirley. I've been on the commission about a year and a couple of months now. I moved here from Austin, Texas 3 years ago. And my background's in archaeology. I spent 10 years doing field work, and then I went to work for FEMA doing historic preservation. And I retired from that 2 years ago. And now I'm trying to enjoy all the historic stuff here.
Thanks, you guys. All right, well, let's move on. We'll go ahead and take a look at the, is there any comment from the public or otherwise that we need to address before we move on to our minutes? Hearing none, we'll move to the approval of the January 11th, 2023 regular meeting minutes. Do we have a motion to accept those minutes?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Shirley. Second? Derek? Any discussion, changes, amendments to those minutes? Okay, hearing none, then those minutes have been approved. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Those minutes of January 11th are approved. Thank you. So next we have public hearings, maybe not. I'm not sure where we are with that.
Do
Chris?
we need to vote that in? Or no?
Pardon?
Do we need to vote the minutes in, or is that okay?
I did a
So
vote
approved?
myself
Okay.
for the minutes, but we can talk more about that
No.
if that's okay.
That's fine, go
Later.
for it.
Yeah. So do we have a public hearing this afternoon?
I think that the proposal of the marquee sign for the Fox Theater rehabilitation is probably gonna get moved to another time. We're kind of getting some more details on that, is that correct?
Well, no, we can, yeah, I can talk about it in essence, so,
View it,
yeah.
review it.
So let's go ahead and open public hearing on the proposal for marquee sign rehabilitation for the Fox Theater.
Yeah, absolutely, and I was hoping Carl Gabrielson would be here today, but he can't. We have received a request from Jay Chimino's group to, on behalf of the city, rehabilitate the Fox Theater marquee sign. So he's willing to spend money to do that and restore it to its original glory, which we really appreciate that gesture and that offer. So what he would like to do is use the sign at one of his businesses temporarily until the Fox Theater gets renovated, at which point it would be returned to the Fox. So we as staff feel that it's a win-win, and we just wanted to present the idea to you all as the Historic Preservation Commission before moving forward with that direction and get any comments and concerns that you all might have about that proposal.
Huh.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Please.
Where will the sign, you're talking about the old sign is going to go sit somewhere for a little while?
Yeah, I think it's at his new marketplace that he's just opened.
Food court?
Yeah, yeah.
And my question is, This is the sign that was there before that kind of came out, right?
Yeah, the triangular shaped marquee sign, the historic sign that was out in front of the Fox. And I should mention, certainly, you know, if we did permit this, the city would have an agreement with Jay and his group to make sure that they're ensuring it, protecting it, and restoring it to standards that we approve.
I thought it was my understanding was that they were gonna put it back to like the original status, which that had nothing to do with the original building.
Yeah, it's as part of the Fox Theater redevelopment. They will put the marquee back on the Fox once we come up with the money to rehabilitate the entire theater. Right now, we want to keep it off of the theater because it is an active construction zone and we don't want to risk, you know, anything happening in that process.
I mean,
I think go ahead.
yeah, I mean, just my, I guess my question or whatever was just that, you know, when we restore these buildings to original condition, well, that sign was never part of the original condition of.
Yeah, we thought that came later.
That
when it
came
was-
way later, like in the 70s,
I could kind of speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, if you could, Kayla.
Yeah, so, there's a difference between, under the Secretary of Interior standards, there's a difference between rehabilitation and like restoration.
Yeah.
And so in this case, it's a rehabilitation, and so because it was kind of an existing condition and it's culturally significant,
okay.
I think that they probably feel it's culturally significant enough that it should remain, even though
Yeah.
the point is correct, the original period of significance.
Well, that answers it, like
Yeah.
the cultural significance.
Yeah.
Okay, that's all good.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So they're just gonna like redo it, completely repaint it?
Yep, put in new lights,
New
new electrical, all of that
blah,
stuff.
blah.
Exactly, yeah.
All this while it's on a new.
They'll do it before it gets attached to the new place, and so they'll fully restore it and then temporarily borrow it for their shop and then return it to us, so,
And then it goes over there once
Yes.
it's ready?
yes,
Okay.
exactly.
Okay.
So is that, and just kind of help me understand process-wise, so will that become part of a staff report, or how do we incorporate your comments today into the overall, process and approval if necessary?
Sure, and it's really more your comments that we're looking for than the other way around. So it's not necessarily an action item that we're asking for
see.
your vote on or anything.
Okay.
We just wanted to make sure we're acknowledging, you know, your significance as the HPC in having these conversations and make sure we're getting any concerns you have out in the open as well as we go through the process.
How long is that anticipated to be?
That's a really good question. So the rehabilitation of the Fox Theater for the actual theater portion of it and the ballroom downstairs and the entryway is estimated to be about $25 million. So it would be until such time as we raise that funding to
I
rehabilitate the
think
theater.
it could be years. Or
It could be several years, yeah.
Do you think there should be some kind of a storytelling plaque or a paper plaque down there at the marketplace that describes that that's not there for good because they would misinterpret, this is the Fox West or
I think that's a terrific idea.
some
Yeah.
kind of,
And a QR code where they can donate.
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah,
wow,
that's
Absolutely.
that's a good idea.
Yes.
You would like to see this back in its original
Yeah.
place, donate, right?
Yeah, I think,
Just
Gene, that's a
something of
terrific
interest,
idea.
An idea that, why would that Fox Theater sign be way down there?
Yeah.
Because
Some
For me.
explanatory,
It seems
yeah.
strange
Yeah.
a little
Yeah.
booklet or some
to
kind
me.
of thing outside or inside that would have.
Yeah, to protect it though.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's protected, well, it'll be rebuilt for exterior wear, right?
Yeah. And
But they're going to refurbish it before they put it on their building.
yes, absolutely. And I do agree that it seems strange. Just for some context, Mr. Chimino is a Trinidad native and now lives in Colorado Springs, but he has an interest in restoring Trinidad.
Right.
And as you can see through a lot of his projects that are going on in the community. So I personally believe this is truly, he loves Trinidad, he remembers the sign, he's nostalgic for it, and he wants to rehabilitate it and then, be able to see it in his lifetime still.
Well, I would like to second what Elizabeth said about some kind of memorandum of agreement
Yes.
with the, from the staff to Jay, and
Yeah,
that we all make sure he's not gonna keep it at the end. No, I know he won't.
and certainly
Just
I think
the
it would be
city will
appropriate,
protect itself.
and I apologize for interrupting, Jean.
No, it's a,
Certainly, I think it would be appropriate for us to put together that MOU and certainly, submit it for your review and see if you have any concerns as well.
Sure.
So,
Yeah, I think, it sounds like a creative way to accomplish something that I think we all have an interest in,
Yeah.
so. Okay, so will there be additional public hearing needed? And again, I'm just kind of trying to figure out process-wise what, in addition to today, what we would need to do to notice it, make sure people have opportunities.
certainly, it's something I would want to bring forward to council for their vote and approval, probably by resolution. So there would be, public input taken at that public
Okay.
meeting as well, and certainly there'd be that process available.
So this constitutes our public hearing on this matter on the marquee for today. Is there any other comment online or elsewhere? I don't think, do we have anybody online?
we're all here.
Any other comments?
No?
Okay, appreciate you
That
all,
closes the
thank you.
hearing for today. Thank you so much. All right. So I'm not sure, Kristen, I'll probably have to ask your direction for this as well. So we're at 4B under public hearing, consideration of landmarking city-owned buildings. So are we opening a new public hearing, or is that just an agenda item?
It can be either or. to
I think
your
it's an
favor.
agenda item. I don't think that we've had, we needed to call a public hearing on that, to my knowledge. So yes, please, go ahead, Chris.
Well, as you know, we have landmarked City Hall, and that went very well. We're anticipating putting the plaque up on the front of the building. And we're looking for another city-owned building until a public application comes forward to landmark. And I've given you a list of buildings, and I'd like to know your input on this as far as what your recommendations are going forward and for application for landmarking. And we'll take those to get a specialized report produced and go forward with that process. And it keeps us, it gives us experience in landmarking, of course, and provides the city with additional landmarked properties.
Yeah, and I think seem like we have a bit of momentum, if I, could say that going, so I think it would be great to continue with that. And we've talked about this a couple of times now. We budgeted for how many landmark apps this year?
4 or 5.
Was
I
it?
want to say 3 or 4, 5.
So we
And I
have
feel
golf
like
course.
if we stay on this progress, we'll get at least 3 done this year.
Yeah, we've got a contractor very fast. Didn't we have the golf course pro shop, the waterworks building as one of our priorities? Or I thought,
Yes, and
and the bandstand, but I'm not sure because we.
yeah, which is the bandstand, which is the park, and we haven't landmarked any of the parks as of yet. So I would just like to hear, like you could just write down some notes and your preferences on which direction we should go.
Right.
Because I don't want to do that without your direction.
Yeah. Thanks for bringing this up. I don't know that I have a preference. Anybody else kind of want to prioritize these? I mean, we could do a tentative sort of 1, 2, and 3, order or some other way.
Yeah, and I'd like to add, I don't mean to interrupt, that we like to take consideration of buildings that are under construction and buildings that are not currently open. As, it's not going to deter landmarking, but I think it brings something more when we landmark a building that can actually be viewed or can be, like, it could be on a, tour of some kind, and it could be accessible And now the Children's Museum is currently not open, so they can see the outside, but it's gonna be difficult to see the inside until we get an opening date on that. And the same thing goes with the Fox Theater. It's not gonna be available for viewing this year or
Right.
possibly next. So take that into mind.
Sorry, I mean to interrupt. What's the plan for the Children's Museum? Is there any plan at all on that building? Is it still supposed to be a children's museum?
We discussed that earlier today.
It's the one next to the marketplace.
Yeah, it used to be the original City Hall is what I heard today, or I learned today. As far as plans go, I don't think we have any specific plans except to get funding for ADA access for the second floor. Until we get that, or we get an idea of how to gain access, we don't have any current plans, if I'm correct.
We have the space and we have a lot of historical items that are architectural and cultural and all sorts of stuff that we have available to curate there. So I think it's just a matter of kind of putting the pieces together and figuring out, okay, what does this become, and how much does that cost?
I think it's great for it to continue to be a museum. I mean, I don't know about just being a children's museum, more of like a Trinidad museum. I know we have the history stuff up on Main Street, but something of a different
That's what I'm wondering. So it was open and operational for people in the room that might have more history as a children's museum at one point?
When we moved here in 2000, it was open. We took our kids there. They had an old schoolhouse representation, and there was desk and the teachers, and there was the jail was in the bottom. So it was open in 2001. So
Really?
yeah, and they had a public body that monitored it, or it was part of the city, I think, still then.
It's always been owned by the city. At the time, it was the Junior Historical Society that operated the museum.
The what?
It was a Junior Historical Society,
Really?
What was that?
a nonprofit organization that formed.
So is it the same thing that we know now as the Trinidad Historical Society? That's something else?
Something else, different people,
Different people.
different focus.
Mm.
I mean, they
Is that
ran
still
that
in a-
children's museum.
I don't think they're alive anymore.
They're
not
not
together.
operating
They're not
anymore.
operating.
No.
Well, it kind of leads me to, and I don't know if we need to discuss this now, but as to that space, we've been trying to collaborate and do outreach with all the other folks that are interested in historic preservation in town, and we did have a meeting, or I attended a meeting with the Trinidad Historical Society last week or the week before, and they talked about their dream to have a heritage center. And because I think as a group, they've been around for, oh my goodness, I don't remember how long, but a really long time, and have really been dedicated, stewards of historic preservation of all kinds in our community for many years. And it just, it just occurred to me, is that, and this is just a thought that maybe could be developed or not, but they would like a place to house all the artifacts that they're currently keeping in their, their basements or wherever they're keeping it. I think that Aguilar has a heritage center. I think a couple of other places do, and maybe just some food for thought to keep that under consideration as a space that could be used for that purpose. I
That's a
don't know.
great idea.
But the other thought would be is if we're going to be doing our outreach event in June, and if there's a way that it would work out that we could have one of these sites that we've already identified as, kind of a priority, maybe be in process or be somehow woven into, we're doing trolley tours in the afternoon of various historic sites. And I'm not sure how that would look, I just thought about it, but if we were trying to landmark that, maybe like the bandstand would be
Yeah.
on our tour, or maybe.
I think the bandstand
That's a good
is-
consideration to take
'Cause
you
it's
know,
summertime,
something that's
you know,
on the
it'd be
trolley
warm,
tour.
and the trolley could go there, and we could talk about, maybe do a little bit of the education that we wanted to do about landmarking while people are en route. We could have a sort of a guide or a steward that's on the trolley, talking about that.
I was just wondering, if the bandstand sounds like something that might be ready, to go.
I
And
think so.
And it's a
That
little
would be my
different
number
than
one
some of the
choice.
other things we've looked at.
It's not a building, it's
What do you
an
guys
exterior.
think?
I like that idea, to
Yeah.
put that as first priority.
I think we just need
It's
to get working on it.
1909.
I mean, Children's Museum, of course, the Waterworks building.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, that's a
That
high
definitely-
priority,
Yeah.
That's a
but
big
I don't
one.
know if that's something you could walk in or it would be a tangible item to,
Where
Explore.
are the 3 buildings? I know where the 1 building is. Where are the other 2?
they're adjacent to the Waterworks building, there's 3 buildings adjacent.
Or we talking about?
Waterworks building, and there are 3 components to that Waterworks building, cause I have 3 different locations.
Is that the same list as what she?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's the water shop building. Company.
Did you need a list? Do you need a copy?
Well, the North Fork Water Treatment, that's up by the lake, up by North Fork Lake,
Oh, yeah,
so.
yeah, I thought you meant,
Yeah, thank you.
I thought there was Waterworks building with another component next to it.
The one that's historical is the actual large
Red.
waterworks building. It has even a wellhead on the inside of it.
Yeah,
And that's where they did the mural, right? They did
Yes.
the mural.
Correct.
Yeah.
I think we should try to get that on our first 3, the waterworks.
Yeah, I think if we could come up with 3 today, that would be a good start, because we really do need to focus.
Yeah.
Would that work for you, Chris? Is that?
Yeah, yeah, and if we could get the Waterworks building open, that would be ideal too.
For
And,
our event, you mean?
So you're saying 1, 2, and 3, 1 being the park and 2 being the Waterworks building?
So Kit Carson Bandstand is 1, Waterworks is 2, and then the third.
Not the fires.
So am I understanding correctly
Yeah.
that the golf course, we can't really consider that until the lease is renewed? Is that what that?
Kind of. There's that component that they ask that we wait until we identify new owners,
Oh.
if that's okay.
So what about the fire station 2? It's one of the
Yeah.
older ones, 1909.
Yeah, the fire station then is the third priority.
Number 2, so that would be the one on Nevada.
On
Right.
Nevada. Awesome.
Okay.
All right.
So that
Does
was
that work
We've
for
got
everybody?
marching orders and we'll get started
good.
straight away on getting some reports together. Keely may be able to help us.
Yeah.
With our next reports.
All right, let's move to unfinished business, and I think we're gonna talk today about, or we're gonna do some more training. We've been trying to do a little bit, I think, each meeting, so that we all kind of understand our roles and some of the parameters of the Historic Preservation Commission. So, do we wanna start with Ms. Audra?
Sure. Would you like me at the podium or here? What's better for
Wherever
you?
you're comfortable.
Either one, actually. I'll stand.
Yeah,
I'll
come up here, I can't see you
stand
right
all the
there.
You're kind of far away.
Okay, glasses. Just a little bit. Okay, so, good afternoon. Today we're going to talk about open meetings and the law that requires that public meetings be open. That's why they're called public meetings. Okay, it's often referred to as the Sunshine Law. The scope, simply put, is that whenever 3 or more members, or a quorum of the members, if there's fewer than 3 members, of a local public body, such as yourselves, get together and public business is discussed, or formal action may be taken, the gathering is considered a meeting and it must be open to the public. So what constitutes a meeting? It's any kind of gathering convened to discuss public business. And here's, I think what's most important, it can be in person, by telephone, electronically, or by other means of communication. So it doesn't have to necessarily be in person. We know that with COVID, everything seems to be, at least in some means, a digital platform. So, so I guess the next question often becomes, what about chance meetings? So you're downtown and you happen to run into one another. Just be aware that a chance meeting can develop into a problem if, again, you have a quorum of the body and the conversation turns into matters that are official of this group. So you can't talk about historic preservation together outside of that, essentially. So electronic communications can mean email, can mean text messages. All of those means of communication are considered electronic. And hand in hand with the Colorado Open Meetings Law is the Colorado Open Records Law. If you're using, for instance, you're texting back and forth and you're having a conversation and you're planning this event, well, it's about business. Those text messages amongst yourselves on your personal devices are now subject to public disclosure as members of this public body. So that means if required, a judge could require that you turn your telephones over until the records are retrieved or what have you. So.
Could I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Would it be, or is there anything set up that we could like if we do have like our little messaging group that we have like somebody here in the city where it goes to that and it's just open as far as it goes to, there's nothing like that set up that we have?
No, and the reason that I say that is the next topic.
Okay.
Part of being open and transparent is publishing your meeting notices and what's going to be discussed,
right,
so that the public is made aware of your discussion topics in advance. There's a legal requirement that you post those notices to locations. They're designated every year. Here and at the library for the last 30 years at least 24 hours in advance of the public meeting.
Okay.
So, yeah, there's really not a whole lot of what I would say is flexibility with that. The conversations really do need to be held in public and the topics need to be disclosed. You should also be mindful of straying away from the topics on your agenda. You did that just a little bit previously, talking about, what could we use the Children's Museum for and what have you. We're talking about landmarking a public building. If you want to talk about that, that's fine, but let's post that. And then you can have a discussion and think of ideas. It's just a lot cleaner, it's better. But let's also talk about consequences. The biggest consequence in my mind is not necessarily anything that this board in particular would get the city in trouble over in a court, probably. It's more of the transparency to the public. And when you talk about topics and they're not disclosed in advance, or you're communicating it amongst yourselves and it's not in a public meeting, it can cause a loss of confidence in local government, because then it gives the public the appearance, oh, they've had this conversation outside of the meeting. How did that happen? How do they know what they're going to come in and vote on and how they're going to vote? Or maybe one of you have mentioned, well, we talked about that, or I saw your message about that. Well, then that's where the government loses that public confidence, because then it's at the very least the appearance of improprieties there. Even if it's a couple of you, it's less than a quorum. It's just better if you can keep your business discussions in this format. So I know that your meeting today was a regular meeting. I would encourage you to have work sessions, even if it's alternatively, so that you can have a little bit more broad discussion on topics. You can talk about use of historic public buildings. And then it's a little bit more broad. You're able then to look at the list and say, what are some ideas? How can we activate this historic building and still keep it historic? So,
Does the work session have to be published 24 hours in
Yes.
advance too?
yes, every public meeting, anytime you all get together and there's a quorum of you. Yep, definitely. So, back to consequences. Not so much with this board because, well, it could be this board as well, because let's talk about some impacts of you making decisions outside of a public arena. So we know that Historic Preservation Commission, part of the goal with landmarking is that these property owners, building owners are able to seek historic tax credits. So that's a monetary gain for somebody, and if you've done something and it hasn't been noticed publicly and you've eliminated somebody's opportunity to perhaps landmark the building, well then you've caused a problem for someone. So there's probably one of the bigger risks. I would say that's probably second biggest risk with this board. There's no criminal punishment for violating the open meetings law, but certainly, like I said, we can end up in court, and definitely serious loss of public confidence. And then if a court were to find that the public body has violated the open meetings law, it would award the prevailing citizen cost and reasonable attorney fees for that. So, do you have any questions so far?
I do. I think, you know, that also, you know, speaking for myself, but certainly with the commission, that we are really committed to being transparent and really want to be very much in compliance with both the open meeting law and any you know, open records requests for all the reasons that you have stated, which are very important. And I think just having some dialogue about it is important as well, and so that we're not you know, overly restrictive in terms of, you know, I think having more work sessions is better than fewer. I think also, though, that this commission, as a historic preservation commission, who is really interested in reaching out and being in collaboration with a number of the, you know, entities in this amazingly special place that we are now living in, Trinidad, to coordinate and collaborate about historic preservation. We're doing this outreach event, so I think, you know, the question mark in my mind has been that we want to absolutely notice all those meetings that we have on that topic. And how do we, in your, sort of, if you could give us some guidance in terms of having meetings with other, you know, I have some thoughts about it, but I'd like to know, you know, like with Main Street, with Historical Society, with all these other groups, in a way that manages that tension, because there is always going to be some tension between transparency and collaboration, and I think we want to find that balance. Does that make sense, or what are your thoughts?
It makes sense. I understand what you're saying. I guess in a perfect world, the tensions wouldn't exist. I think part of the tensions come from the formalities. But as a public body, we've got to abide by the law and follow those formalities. So what I would say is, if you're not inclined to necessarily have a joint meeting and gather the bodies together in a work session, a posted legal work session, less than a quorum of you can meet with them and make it less formal, and then report back to the other members.
Can I just ask you on that, because it's been on my mind too, so specifically, so if we want to meet, if two members of this commission want to meet, for instance, with Historic Main Street at one of their meetings, because we are working with them to use that space, etc., Now, their meetings are required to be noticed, is that correct?
Mhm.
Okay, so if they, their notice are saying two-member, historic preservation is gonna be here to talk about X, Y, or Z, are we okay with, are we covered then?
Yes,
Okay.
as long as it's publicly noticed. That's fine.
Alright.
But the Historical Society, for instance, you spoke of them, they're not a local public body.
Right, so that's a good
They're
example,
their own
so,
separate entity. That requires you to make sure that it gets noticed. If there's going to be more than a
so I was the only one there at that
or
meeting.
quorum.
But I really do wanna ask, get clarification, so I was the only one there,
Mhm.
so that didn't need to be noticed, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Cause you could report to us what
Right.
you guys.
Yeah.
Right.
And the other thought would be, and I just really appreciate being able to have the discussion, so, is that when I mentioned, oh, what about using this city-owned building, namely the Children's Museum, as a space for some other purpose, I think it's, so that's within the realm of talking about prioritizing landmarking. We are noticed, we are, open for any public comment at this point. Do you think that was too far afield?
Yes and no. It's not necessarily sticking to the topic of landmarking because how the city uses it isn't necessarily,
A landmark.
no,
Yeah,
it's not a
Okay.
landmarking issue.
that's fair, yeah,
So,
gotcha.
was it horribly egregious? No.
Well, that's
I
good.
mean, and it happens. I mean, it's easy to get off topic, especially with a body such as you, that you're all ambitious, you're all very focused. It's very easy to do that, but just keep it in the back of your mind. Oh, are we getting too far afield? Let's take it back one. Let's go back to the agenda item and what we have
Okay.
posted.
All right.
So, open records, I'll talk with you just briefly. As the city clerk, I'm the custodian of public records. So, when a citizen or whomever wants to obtain public records, they need to make a formal request to me. So, what would be public from this board? Any minutes, agendas, anything, any of the reports that are submitted to the board, anything that is going in front of you for official action or has been in front of you for official action. So just keep that in mind. But let's also talk about Cora. And so you've made a citizen mad because you didn't broadcast that you wanted to landmark. But you've talked about it amongst yourselves in a text message or email. They can request those text messages or emails between you, and you would have to produce them as part of that request.
And I think, and it's definitely not to be argumentative. When I ask questions, it's really to information seeking. And it's, in my mind, it was really clear that certainly we would not be discussing a landmarking issue, amongst ourselves or off the record or any other of the sort of quasi-judicial business of this commission. I think, discussing having a final draft of a save the date notice in an email, is that a violation?
If all of you are communicating, yes.
If everyone's copied, but it's only going to Chris, for instance.
It hasn't been publicized.
You should not ever be included all in one email like that. It's just, it's safest not to. Wait and bring it here, or ask Chris to distribute it for consideration at the next meeting. Something along those lines. As long as you don't hit that reply all and start commenting and saying, oh no, I don't like this or I don't like that, you can communicate with Chris one-on-one like that, but not as a group.
Okay, that's helpful. So I have just, for the record, so I do have the one-page handout. It's from the Office of Legislative Legal Services that addresses the issues that you've talked about. So I'll, I don't know if you want a copy of that. Audra, for you guys' records or anything?
If you're, okay, so let's talk about that.
Yeah.
If you're handing out
Yes.
documents like that, that
Mhm.
go to the members of this
Mhm,
board,
mhm.
you should always make sure that whoever's taking minutes for this board gets a copy of that record. It goes in your meeting file.
Mhm.
That way, if a request is made to view that record, it's available to produce.
Okay, so that's what I'm submitting for the record is
Very
this handout on open meeting requirements of the Colorado Sunshine Law. So-
Very good.
So really, any copies that we might hand out?
Yes.
Any copies that are looked at by this board need to be submitted for the
Available to the
record.
public, yes.
We are going to have another training later this month on March the 24th, starting at 10. It'll be a training and an appreciation luncheon. Among the other topics, I'm sure, will be ethics. What I can say just in briefly, so there is a local code of ethics and there's also a Colorado code of ethics. To me, it's pretty obvious what those guidelines are. So explicitly prohibited would be using confidential information for personal benefit, accepting gifts or economic benefits as a reward or inducement, transacting business with those one supervises or inspects, acting to benefit one's business or client, and taking a personal or business interest in any municipal contracts. So those are just some of the things that are very expressly prohibited.
Quick question on that point is, so when a citizen applies to be on a board or commission, do we have is the city providing a conflict of interest form for them to sign before they're appointed, or? I know I didn't sign one. but-
No, we don't do that. We do, okay, so here's one of our challenges as a city. When you went around and you talked about how often or how recently you were appointed, it's hard to get all that training in. We do give that handout. It's brief. It's hoped that people would understand what conflict of interest is whenever they apply to serve on these boards. And sometimes it's very obvious. Obviously, also, you're policing yourselves. So, if for instance, Jean mentioned she and her husband do a magazine, and you want to advertise this save the date, and you decide, oh, we're gonna pay for an advertisement in Jean's magazine. Does Jean have a conflict of interest?
I think it would be, just from my perspective, helpful to have that laid out ahead of time, though. I understand what you're saying about we should be policing ourselves. I totally agree. But I also think that it would really help the commissioners and any board members that are applying to understand before they kind of commit, that this is, that there may be conflicts of interest that would rule them out from participation, and I just think it would be helpful.
Can they declare that when the vote is taken and
Absolutely.
withdraw
Yeah.
from the vote?
Yes,
Is that how it's
absolutely.
all?
Yeah,
that's
and
when
what
they're
to do in
supposed
the
to
case
do.
of a conflict of
Yes.
interest. Because a lot of times conflicts can be remedied, sometimes they cannot. So I don't
Right.
think, and I know sometimes I think people get, understandably, when they hear that term, conflict of interest, is kind of scary and like, oh my goodness. And yeah, it's something to be on your radar, but I think that it's also something that's in some cases can be eliminated or
And what I'll
remedied.
say is, okay, so let's say Jean says, it wasn't her idea on the magazine. Say one of you says, oh, that's a great magazine to put it in. Let's go ahead and do that. Jean recuses. What is the public's perception going to be though?
Well, I think that's important.
And that it is
That's what I'm
important.
saying. I
That's
think
again
we
the
should have-
transparency issue.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
even if it's not a conflict of interest, could it look like a conflict of interest?
Correct.
And could it be perceived that way?
That's
and
right.
so it doesn't always have to be that it is a
I
conflict of
get that.
interest.
I
So,
totally agree. Yes. Chris.
What if she furnishes her magazine for free for advertisement? Is that still
Or a donation
for a donation?
to whom?
to the board, to our event?
Free
So that's what
publishing.
she's intending to do.
Oh, I didn't know. Let's see. You intend to Furnish your magazine for a
Just a-
donation.
We'll furnish an ad,
Oh, an ad.
a half-page ad to promote the event as a donation to the event.
Oh, as a donation.
Right.
You're not
Not
asking for
gift.
money?
No,
Oh, that's not a conflict.
That's-
And I would say that's not a
That's-
conflict.
I just wanna
No,
make
because
that
there's no
clear.
personal, right, there's no personal
Gain.
benefit or
Yeah.
gain whatsoever that you're actually donating
right.
Yeah.
instead of asking for money or seeking a benefit, so.
Now, is it okay if we pay some of our members to do some work for the commission at all, for like our event? Like, to make sure the technical work is really top quality event? Can we pay a member of our commission, or are they only because they have such good technical skills?
And that's gonna be a challenge too. So, in the handout that was submitted to you, you know that we have to have 3 quotes.
Yep.
If you do things and it's done
What's the
correctly,
dollar volume?
that,
Any
so
amount?
there is a dollar value, but especially if you know that somebody among this board is going to want to put in a quote for that, you absolutely need to seek bids, seek
Okay.
quotes.
Okay.
3 competitive quotes. Whoever's doing that, if they do it as a business, should have a business license to do that, but definitely you need to seek those quotes.
Okay. It doesn't matter what the dollar value is.
I get quotes for everything.
Okay.
I mean, unless it's something
Got yourself.
$20, then no, I won't get quotes, but aside from that, I couldn't even tell you what the purchase amount needs to be before I get quotes, because I just always get
No, we
quotes.
just keep it in the file and that.
Actually, no, whenever you,
Select.
yep, whenever you select, you're going to ask for staff to get you a purchase order. You're gonna turn in those 3 quotes, and that'll be the backup for that purchase order.
Okay.
Make sense?
Anybody else?
And I did provide the purchasing procedure to
Okay.
the commission, so you can go back
Okay.
in your emails and find it, the rules for procurement.
Okay, well, we really appreciate your time and just trying to make sure that we're operating in the way that we need to be, so
Yeah,
thank you.
Thank you for your time and effort in doing what you do. I know
Appreciate it.
it's, this one, I think this board has a little bit more of, maybe a learning curve to impose on the public, because they don't understand exactly what the benefit is with the landmarking. That's where it's the learning curve for them, and so your events are good events to help teach
Yeah.
them. The other thing I would say is that, the people who have been successful in having their properties landmarked, they're great champions for this, because they are really realizing that benefit.
Yeah.
And so, word of mouth is always great.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks so
Thank you.
much. All right. Our next item under unfinished business is our quadrennial. I think I learned how to pronounce that,
We have
yes?
one more. We have Steve.
Oh, sorry?
Steve
Steve,
Ruger.
oh,
What about?
Parliamentary.
no, I think
Oh,
we're.
yeah, parliamentary.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
I thought we were good, sorry.
No worries, I
Appreciate it.
apologize. So I'll be very quick. I just wanted to kind of do a crash course on Robert's Rules of Order. And really I'm just gonna focus on 3 basic things that I think all of our boards and commissions and the city council should just really be aware of. I think your meetings are run very well, just wanted to put that out there. But, so first of all requests to speak should technically go through the chair. So if you would like the floor on any item, you would say, Ms. Chair, Madam Chair, I would like to speak on this item. And really anybody speaking, whether it be a member of staff or the public or you all, should always request the floor from the chair. And that's just a basic tenet of decorum, just so people aren't over talking each other. And the chair's role in that is to ensure that you all have equal opportunities to comment and speak on an item and make sure that the meeting is being run efficiently. We have other boards and commissions, and I think our training in March, later this month, will really help with that, where they kind of talk over each other, they interrupt each other, and fortunately you are not one of them. You guys have a very good quality of decorum, and I appreciate that. But just wanted to kind of point that out. Interactions really should go through the chair. As far as motions and seconds go, just want to talk about that a little bit. So anytime there's an action item, you all are doing it, but you need that motion and that second. So the way it should work is someone should make the motion on the item. It needs to be seconded before there's any discussion on the item. And then at that point, it's in the hands of the entire body, and you all can discuss the item, and then ultimately the chair will call for a vote once discussion is closed, and yays and nays. So for you all, obviously a passing vote would be 3 members. So a majority of members would pass that vote. Public hearings are something that you all consider, so I do want to touch on those briefly. They're quasi-judicial hearings, which is why we gavel them open as a public hearing, as the chair did. And it's the opportunity for people to come present testimony, evidence. Technically, they could enter evidence as exhibits with the clerk and have that entered into the record as part of the public hearing. But it's an opportunity for you all to hear from an applicant potentially, so they can state their case for your consideration in that public hearing venue. Afterwards, which the public hearing is closed, then you all have the opportunity to discuss the item and approve it by motion and second. And then lastly, I think the only other thing I wanted to kind of mention on rules of debate, rules of order, I think there's a provision in Robert's rules that allows each member to speak twice on one items. I'm not a stickler for that, so it's really up to you all how much you want to do that. I just wanted to point that out. But the point of debate is not to continually make arguments against somebody and try to bully them into seeing your way. It's for you to have the floor to make your comments and your concerns about the item and your perspective, and offer your perspective to everybody else. So just wanted to kind of mention that. And then just trying to think if there's anything else Robert's rules. If you look at it, it's huge. Oh, that's the last thing I wanted to present to you. So we are actively working, Audra, our city attorney Les Downs, and myself, we're drafting some basic rules of procedures for the city council and all of our boards and commissions. So that way you'll have, it's a short document, a 2-page handout just on basic rules of decorum and how to interact at meetings. But certainly open to any questions you have, and like I said, I think you all do a good job. You're very civil to each other, and I very much appreciate it.
That'd be super to have a cheat sheet
Yeah.
or a handout, and I'm wondering, just a kind of niggly question. So
Sure.
on routine matters, for instance, we've had, I've seen people do it 2 ways.
Yeah.
On a vote, on an action item, to do a roll call vote.
Yeah.
For minutes, for instance, and I've actually been, because I've been a nerd about this, I was looking at some other commission meetings, for instance, the Denver Historic Preservation Commission, and sort of how they handle their meetings. And so when they're doing approval of the last minute's meetings, they just do a simple, all those in favor. So
Sure.
it's kind of an abbreviated process for time. What are is there one way or the other that you
No,
think is
I
better?
think it's more than appropriate to call for a consensus vote like that. What I would say is if something passes or there is a concern, then any of the members here could object, and in which case it would go to a formal vote. So if there's concern, if you pass minutes and you just said all those in favor aye, and one person was a no. But someone said, I object because I want to talk about some things in the minutes before they're adopted, then you could have that discussion and then put it towards a formal vote after that. But certainly it's more than appropriate to ask for a consensus vote of ayes and nays.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. That does bring up one last point. So any questions you have about rules of debate or anything like that are determined by the chair. So if you have a concern about the way the meeting's operating or someone speaking out of turn, you could call a point of order, and then it's the chair's job to make a determination on how to proceed on that point of order. All right?
Okay. Any questions, anybody? Thank
Okay.
you so much.
Yeah, thank you all.
Appreciate it. All right, now may we move to 5B, our quadrennial review, please.
Well, hi again. I'm Lindsay Llewellyn, the History Colorado CLG coordinator. And as you're saying, this is the year for the evaluation of the CLG program here in Trinidad. It happens once every 4 years, so quadrennial review. But I wanted to talk briefly about the CLG program and the benefits and responsibilities that come with that. So it's a federal program run through the National Park Service. Historically, preservation has happened through the National Park Service, and then we have the standards that come out through the Department of the Interior. And that's mainly because it's originally preservation developed around trying to keep people from looting archaeological sites. So then it kind of just went along from there as the program developed in the U.S. So the Certified Local Government Program is the program for partnerships between local governments, the state, and the federal government. So each certified local government is certified by the National Park Service, and then the program is run through each state historic preservation office, which is History Colorado in Colorado. So then in Colorado we have 68 certified local governments, and there's about 2,100 nationwide, and those are just continually being added to. We just had our 68th last week. For CLG benefits, the state gets specific funds from the federal government for running federal preservation programs, and 10% of those funds have to be given to the certified local governments in subgrants. So we can't use it for anything else. It has to go to our subgrant program. And then in Colorado, because we have the state historical fund, we're able to use that to match the federal funds, so we can offer no match grants to our certified local governments. And those are for things specifically for your local government preservation program that helps keep your preservation program going. So things like preservation planning and survey planning. You could do disaster and resilience planning for historic resources, things like that. Actual surveys and inventories of historic properties or historic resources. Education and outreach projects, like we're having an Adobe workshop in Saguache this coming year, so things like that that benefit your property owners in your preservation program. Those are the types of things you can apply for grants for, and those are due every January, so it's a once a year grant process. And we also offer scholarship funds for saving places or other educational opportunities that can be funded through the CLG program as well. The other benefit that's just really great for your property owners is your local landmarks. You have a lot of National Register landmarks, so they would qualify as well, but any local landmarks with the CLG are qualified for the state residential and commercial tax credit program. So those are up to 35% of rehabilitation costs in a rural area. So that's a really great benefit for any local landmarks here in Trinidad. You also get access to Compass, which is our cultural resource database. So if you were doing a survey project or just wanted to know what previous work had been done as far as survey and inventory goes on any property, we have a database that has all of that previous work that's been done in the state. So it could be, any previous surveys done by the city of Trinidad, but also any that have been mandated through like CDOT or other state or federal projects that have been going on. There's often a surprising amount of information on different properties out there. So access to that is one of the benefits of the CLG program. Training is another benefit. So like I said, we offer scholarships for different training opportunities, and then I'm happy to help put together different trainings from myself or anyone else with History Colorado if it might be helpful. And we also have a webinar series run through the CLG program. So I think the next one is on tax credits, and it's later this month. And then we'll have some training on the National Register. And then the National Park Service staff is actually doing 2 trainings on National Park Service grants as a benefit for certified local governments. So that should be great. And that's I think those are in April and June. So there'll be some really good webinars coming up. There's also technical preservation support. So if you ever have a question about what's most appropriate for a property, for example, previously I was a staff member, the historic preservation officer for Central City, and we had an inquiry about putting an exterior elevator on a historic school building, and I just had no idea what would be appropriate for that. So I reached out to the person who previously had my role, and she was able to give me some technical advice on what's most appropriate for that type of project. You get a formal role in the National Register review process, and then a formal role in commenting on federal undertakings, which is the Section 106 process. So we often see that through like cell towers, highway projects, any like HUD, housing projects, things like that. If those are affecting historic or cultural resources in your area, the commission has the ability to comment on those and how you see them impacting your own local area, because obviously you're the experts on Trinidad versus somebody in the state or somebody in the federal government who doesn't really know what things are like here. For responsibilities, you need to enforce your own local preservation ordinance, which tells you what your powers and procedures are for historic preservation matters. Need to establish and maintain a commission. So commissions in the Certified Local Government Program need to have at least 5 members and meet at least 4 times a year, which you guys are doing fine at, obviously. Send meeting minutes over to me, and Chris does that as part of the annual report process every year. I read those and make sure that there's no I look for common questions or problems that come up amongst the CLGs and see if training is needed, or if there's just something that we can do to help out with our local governments that I don't know about. Provide for adequate public participation, so that's basically what you just heard about, making sure that you're following all the open meeting laws, and you had time for public comment earlier in the meeting, so that's one thing that I look for as well. Maintain a system of survey and inventory, so knowing what you have in your own local area. Usually we look for surveys to happen every 5 to 10 years, and those can also be funded through our CLG grant program. And, review and comment on National Register nominations, that's a requirement if you do have any. One person should attend at least one State Historic Preservation Office approved training at least once per year. And I know that you guys have already done that because of Saving Places this year. And then submit an annual report. So that Chris put in November, so that gets submitted in the fall every year. So those are the basic benefits and responsibilities of the program, and then I'm here as a resource for you if you have any preservation questions, and then of course I can ask anyone at History Colorado if I don't know the answer, and try to get information for you as needed. So, yeah, do you guys have any questions about the program?
Well, on that last point that you made about access for technical assistance on CLG issues, what is the appropriate mechanism for that? I mean, can the commission contact you, or do we need to go through Chris? What is the kind of the protocol, if any, for that?
I think normally it would go through staff if you have a staff member, especially if it's something that you've been discussing, in your commission meetings.
Okay. Yeah, that's helpful. And so if we were needing or wanting to ask for you, or maybe for your executive director, to participate in our outreach event in June to give some education to our community, we would do that through Chris as well. Is that right?
I think that would be good, or as the chair, you could write a letter or email or something on behalf of the commission.
I shouldn't ask you that now.
Let me ask you now.
June 3rd, but we'll follow up.
Okay.
If we could.
We've had some people that want to know about their residential properties and why would it benefit them to landmark.
Okay. Yeah.
So,
well, we could potentially put together a group with myself and our tax credit expert to come out.
that would be good.
Super.
It's hard to explain to people when we're just learning.
Well, I think we don't have that expertise, I think, and we would really benefit from that.
Yeah,
so.
definitely.
They still have to put up the money up front, and then they get the credit back.
That's right.
So
Yeah.
they repair and restore.
Yeah. So obviously that can be a barrier, but knowing that you're having money coming back, hopefully, is a good incentive for people.
And then it would be a question about how to utilize or have the surveys that have been done previously here in Trinidad. I've got a wealth of information, and perhaps at some point, not necessarily today, we could ask how to share that information in a meaningful way with the citizenry so that they understand and, you know, be some kind of educational process. Because I know you see other communities, and that's
Yeah.
why I'm kind of asking you all these questions since we have you here.
Yeah, definitely. So I think there's like 2 different tracks that you can go on. So one is sharing that information with the people who actually own the properties. So doing property owner outreach, it could be for people who are already have their properties locally landmarked or ones or nationally landmarked too, so they know that their property is significant. Or ones that could potentially be designated in the future. Or when you do a new survey project, you could send out the survey forms that you get back from that project to each property owner at the end. So I think people are really interested in the histories of their own properties, so that can often.
Is there a way that you isolate each survey place that they did and send that to the owner? Is that
Yeah,
what you do?
so we've had other CLGs, like Buena Vista actually went door to door and like handed out their surveys that they just did like a year ago. But you could also just mail them out or have other ways that you contact the property owners to let them know that they're available. And then, yeah, people get excited about that. I know we've got one survey going on right now, and they're having a bunch of property owners come in that weren't part of the survey, hoping that they can learn more about their own properties. So I think it's a really great way to spark interest in the history of the area. And then you can also plan, you know, that we mentioned earlier that there's an architectural walking tour app, but you could have different tours of maybe neighborhoods or things like that available based on your survey information as well. That takes a little bit more.
We actually
Yeah,
have, the
concerted.
tourism board has 42 buildings that
Oh,
were in a video and audio.
oh, great.
So we do have one of those already for the
Yeah.
Corazon de Trinidad area. that was
Yeah.
funded. And
So,
it's part of our tour, it's part of our June 3rd event is to have
oh yeah,
a girl who wrote that and put that together and show, well, we had them last year too, show how the app is used.
oh, great.
So we have it on the app so people can actually self-guide their own tour.
Yeah. So using surveys to add to that or
Right.
look at other neighborhoods could be really helpful.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Thank you so much. Anybody else have questions, thoughts?
Well, we should send you an invitation, or if we can get you, make sure that
Well,
you
yeah.
come to our event, and if you have that,
Yeah.
what the one part of the event is to do the landmarking, so I don't know if you wanna be in that session, or
Probably.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, I'm
to help us
happy to
give the residential people that information.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay.
But yeah, let's like communicate by email so I
Okay.
can look at my calendar and
Yeah.
make sure everything
Absolutely.
is good. But
Yeah.
yeah, we're always happy to
Okay.
do trainings and come out.
Thank you
to
so
different
much.
places. So, yeah, thanks for having me, and obviously if any other
Yeah,
questions
any
come up.
questions for us, or any thoughts or suggestions, guidance?
Well, so with the evaluation process, I like, observe your meeting, and then I'll have a call with Chris to talk about the program generally, and like it's sort of things like where do you post your agendas and stuff like that. So sort of the practical items around that, and then I'll have an evaluation report after that. You know, before the end of the year, usually I will wait for the annual report to come in, so I have the full year's information available. So yeah, there'll be other stuff coming from me as part of the evaluation process throughout the year.
All right, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks.
you.
Thanks very much.
Okay, we're getting close here. We're gonna look at number 6 on reports. And we have, I think, a couple. We have our chairperson, our commissioner report, and our planning and administrator report. And I think we wanted to talk about our impressions from the Saving Places conference. And I'm just gonna say, defer mostly, I think, to Carlos, but it was a wonderful opportunity. We really appreciate the city, Chris getting us registered and all the issues and trouble that go with that. But it's a great conference, and I really, I think 4 of us attended virtually. And
I never got my login.
Pardon?
I never got my login.
You never got your login?
Mm-mm.
Uh-oh,
Snafu.
snafu.
I wasn't able to use yours either.
No, why didn't you let me know? I'm sorry, I did not know that. I thought you were in. I am so
No.
sorry. Well, there will be an opportunity to view the conference,
I actually tried to do
right?
that.
Are we gonna do that like we did last year where they offer the videos of the
Yeah, they're all
conference?
I think
Yeah.
they were already supposed to be up
Yeah.
They
after
are.
they were presented.
So
But you
we'll
can't look at
rectify
them
your
unless you have the
access.
login, and I never got
Right.
the login.
We'll get that fixed for you,
Okay.
Shirley. I did not know that you,
No, I was never able to,
we'll correct that.
because they were gonna send some thing to your phone, and then I had to plug that, I'm like, forget it.
Well, it's a wonderful, I mean, I just learn so much every time we participate, so we really appreciate it. We do have the on-the-road version coming up in August, I guess it is, again, in La Junta. It'd be wonderful if our new planning and development director could attend those. It's just such a rich experience. Anyway, Carlos, do you want to talk about your experience? Because you went in person.
Yeah, I was there in person. It was great. It was at the Embassy Suites there in Boulder. But it was a great place. There's a lot more people there than I expected.
Like about how many attended?
I
Roughly.
would say close to like 300 to 400. There was a lot of people there. I mean, the big room that they had was full to the max, and there's people
Wow.
standing up. So a lot of people there. So it was a lot of good meeting other people from other localities and other preservation commissions and stuff like that, or just people that have been part of preservation for years and have been going to those meetings for years and years. So and just kind of a lot of the people I was talking to just kind of spoke about where we're from, and a lot of people know about Trinidad and how many great resources we have here as far as history goes, and a lot of those people were really envious of all of the resources we have here. So that was a big takeaway of just like, this is important. What we're doing here is important. We got a lot of work to do. So I mean, I went to several sessions. I guess I'll just talk about the ones I went to. One thing, so one of the first ones I went to after, like, just when we went to the breakout sessions, the first one I went to was just like wild ideas about preservation. And I mean, people had some good ideas.
What was
It was
the
a lot
title
of, it
again?
was about wild ideas for preservation.
Wild ideas
Just
about
like
preservation.
different things you could do about bringing the attention of preservation and stuff like that. And you know, I brought up the stuff that I'm doing here with the 360 images, the drone stuff, and nobody's doing that kind of stuff. So it was pretty amazing to be like, oh, these are great tools for preservation and nobody's using these things. So it's like, okay, well, that's great. I mean, I guess that's great for me, for a business owner, but I mean, I think it's something that I'm looking into, is like, you know, try to increase that number of people to use these resources, because, you know, the stuff that I've been able to do with it, and document with it, I mean, it's a great thing for others. And I was able to talk to archaeologists with History Colorado, and we talked a lot about what I was doing and how it would lead into archaeology and stuff like this. And, he just told me that sounds like some great stuff that I'm doing, that I should apply for some grants for History Colorado, because nobody's doing this type of work, which I plan to do. But it just opened my eyes to I mean, that was one of the big things that started preservation, is just a lot of photo work of a lot of locations around the US that people saw, and they were like, well, these need to be saved. And that's how preservation kind of started, was with a lot of photography. And you know, it's just like, it's still there, but it's not really like as big as it is. So I think that for me, that's just a calling point for me to like try to do that with here. So that was just one thing. The other one I went to after that was the LGBTQ historic sites in Colorado, which was a great thing. And I really wanted to do that because I wanted to make sure that they had Dr. Bieber's office and all that stuff that he did here on their schedule, and they were like, oh yeah, we definitely. And I talked to them, and they're really interested on joining with us to try to get some of that stuff monumented in. Because I think there's something with History Colorado, right, with the recognition of these sites in Colorado.
Yeah, so we've got certainly one of the initiatives that's going on right now is recognizing sites associated with underrepresented communities, and that would be a really big one. And I guess I was telling staff earlier, but since Dr. Bieber's office is already in the National Register District, it would be possible to just amend that National Register District nomination to include trans rights as an area of significance in the register nomination. And then my understanding is that it would be the first site in the country to be recognized for trans rights as a significance.
That's very interesting.
Should be awesome.
Is that, just quickly, and I don't know if we can answer this, would that designation be eligible for local landmarking? Or would it only be a national designation?
Since it's already on the National Register, that
Right.
would be, for the National Register, but you could, go through the local landmarking process yourselves if there was interest.
I'm just asking that partly because I think our ordinance only covers that, historic preservation only applies, or we can review alterations to locally landmarked properties. I don't know if I said that correctly.
That's
So,
correct.
okay, so it would, in order for us to sort of be able to review or maintain that property, that site, even though, is it a property or is it gonna be a cultural?
I mean, it's a building, so.
A building.
Yeah, that's right, but that's, I guess one reason why local preservation is so important is because that is the only place where you have regulatory review of changes or demolition of properties. Otherwise, you can have a property on the National Register and somebody could demolish it or change it, to be completely unrecognizable with no formal review, so. It is really important to have your local landmarking.
That was a big
program.
learning point for me in recent weeks, so, okay, thank you so much.
So yeah, that was like the big thing that came out of that one, that I wanted to make sure that they had that
Yeah.
on their schedule as a site, because it is a very important site. I mean, he did a lot of
Indeed.
important work with the trans community. So, let's see, what other ones were good? The next one I went to was the Alchemy of Historic Place Excavation, and it doesn't like really ring to me what really went on in that one, because there was one that just got kind of, that's this new one, okay, the next one I was gonna talk about. So the another one I did went to was conversations around the historic branches of the Pinon Canyon Maneuver Site. So, as you all know, the Pinon Canyon Maneuver Site is pretty much all in Los Alamos County. But when the Army either purchased or took control of some of the properties in that area, it was mostly old ranches that were out there. So they either bought some of those ranches or bought portions of those ranches, or they just took over some of those ranches because they weren't either being used or they were underused, blah, blah, blah. But on the whole site, there's, I think he said there's like 7 or 8 ranches with buildings and stuff like that. Some of them are fairly new-ish, but what I mean by newish is like 50s, 60s. But there's some older stone buildings that are, very, very old and are out there. So there's a lot of research out there, but the reason that they had this conversation is the Army doesn't plan on doing anything with these buildings. They don't plan on doing any kind of demolition. They don't plan on putting any money in them. They don't plan on doing any kind of preservation work. They're looking at groups to come in to do some of the preservation work. Of course, we couldn't have people just go out to these ranches or these sites, but what they're looking for is people to document these sites, either gather resources from these sites and stuff, maybe create like a resource center that's near the Pinon Canyon site that'd be like, oh, these are the ranches that were out there, these are the people that lived out there, this is what they did, these are the maps of their properties, or even he said that some of these buildings have, you know, still old stuff in them, stuff from the ranches, you know, as far as like resources. So
Who was
they're
that?
looking.
What was the name of that person?
His,
Or
I
I can
didn't
look in
bring
your
his
folder.
card
Or I
with
can look
me,
it up.
but I have all of his information. But he was with the Army, so.
She's with the Army.
But I have his information, and he said that if we all want to, as a group, go out there and tour the sites, we can at any time. He would take us out there. So if we want to like try to figure out a day, I'm gonna contact him initially, all that. But if we want to like try to plan a day where we can go out and look at those, we can definitely do that. Let's see here. What else? There was a lot of talk on stuff that's down in the San Luis Valley, because there's a lot of resources that were over there, some stuff that got saved over there recently. A store in San Luis that's the oldest store in Colorado that's still operating. So they talked about that. They were talking about some like adobe potato barns that they're trying to restore down there, and I went to that because we have tons of farm stuff here.
We went to.
Saw that.
Yeah.
Just went to it.
Yeah, so there's tons of that you know, farm stuff
Right.
here, and I was just wondering like, well, what
Went
would
to-
that mean for like doing kind of preservation of like some of the barns or some of the stuff
So
around
much
here? 'Cause
here,
there's
yeah.
some of that, so, you know, it was just to get my thoughts on what other stuff is available out there. What other ones did I go today? Can't think of any, let me see here. I should have planned this better, but I thought I'd just open this up and I'd remember everything, but I don't.
Yeah.
See what other things I could think about that we went on over there. I didn't do any of the tours or anything because I just really wanted to concentrate on going to most of the different types of presentations that were available there. So I didn't do any of that kind of stuff. One thing I think is also important that we should think about, and even, I mean, I don't know if we have our event. And I think what we have going for it's great. But another thing that this whole event kind of brought to mind is just like, I mean, especially for this area, we had a huge amount of Ute and Apache Indians in this area, and to try to like incorporate something with bringing them into, you know, because they were here long before us. They probably had a different name for Simpson's Rest. They probably had a different name for the Pico here.
I think the
You know.
comments I think it was the opening remarks, I won't remember her name, I believe she was
Yeah.
a tribe member, and it really struck me to talk about how, you know, what was underneath that bank building, you know, what is the significance to the indigenous people of that barn or this or that. So I just think they really sort of shook things up a bit, which I thought was really helpful in terms of looking at, you know, cultural and historic preservation through a broader lens,
Right.
which I think was really
Right.
important.
And I know we already have our plan for this stuff, so I'm not thinking of like, but, you know, just to think of like some of that stuff in the future, like, you know, whenever we think of like doing any kind of like next event, to bring in somebody from maybe the Ute tribe.
Yeah, I actually
Really
made some
speak about
inquiries,
this.
but I haven't found anybody, but we can talk, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
more about
We have one
that
lady that-
work session.
Yeah, our
Yeah.
work session, we can talk about that.
Yeah, so I mean that was great, but I mean it was just great just talking to people and realizing that, you know, that even though we're out here, we're this small group way out here, like it's, they all know what's going on over here, and they, I mean, there was a lot of talk as far as
How do you think-
Trinidad and Trinidad resources
Why
in
did that
some of
happen,
these
do you
stuff.
think, or how did that happen?
As far as what?
How the people at the conference think about Trinidad so highly?
Because we have all these resources here, and they see them and they know about them. And they're like, oh man, they have that
Where
old,
did they see it?
they have that old Jewish church or synagogue over there. Man, I wish we had that in our town. We could do something. You know, like we do. We definitely have. I mean, the weed money is drying up.
Yes,
The best resource we have right now is all these old buildings.
absolutely.
I mean,
And you brought up a good point.
historical
That's a good point.
tourism is huge. There's tons of
Heritage
people that do
tourism.
that. You know?
Yeah, I think we need to, one of the takeaways that I got actually, Lindsay, from your session was about having a work session with, council, city council, in conjunction with planning and zoning and historic preservation, so that we could have a broader conversation about the point that you're making, among other things, but I think we really need to have that kind
Definitely.
of back and forth in a work session, so.
Yeah, we definitely need to have that conversation and with tourism too, because they're always looking for other things. Like
Yeah,
we have tons of great stuff here.
we do.
I mean, there's great buildings. I mean, there was also the talk. I talked to another guy he was from another. He was on a commission years ago. But he's been going to these meetings for 25 years or so.
Yeah.
He said. And I was just telling him about Trinidad, and he's like, oh, that place is so great, blah, blah, and I told him about our historic district, and how we also have, you know, tons of great houses that are, you know, tons of architectural and cultural significance on them. He's like, create another district,
Yeah.
Yes.
you know, so, you know, if
Yeah.
that's something
Yeah.
we wanna think about.
No, we do, and I think
later.
we are probably, I have to do the chair thing and bring us back a
Yeah,
little
I know.
bit to our, topic, but I
Right,
think
right,
those are really important issues that we need to
Yeah.
address.
So that's just things
Okay.
that we should think about in the future,
Absolutely.
but.
Thank you so much for going and representing Trinidad. We really, really appreciate it. Yeah, we're in a unique place and we need to appreciate that and
Yeah.
protect it. So, Chris, I think do you have an administrator's report?
I didn't prepare one today, but I did attend, and I have them all written down. I didn't bring it with me. Sorry.
Do we still need to write down, do we still need to submit written back to the District of Colorado? The written,
Yeah, I think we do have a submittal requirement don't we, this year?
Yeah, but it would just be for one person, so.
well, just
for one?
That's
Yeah.
for me.
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
Well, that's helpful. Okay.
All right,
Anything
something
else
down.
from planning?
No, I don't have anything else to add this
Okay.
time.
All right, thank you so much. Is there a motion to adjourn our meeting at 4:02? Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Second?
I'll second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. Thank you all. I'm not gonna bang the gavel. I'm not gonna do it.
Come on, let's
Madam Chair, you have to bang bang.
Bang, bang. You've got your own water, you're doing good.
All right. Thanks, Eric.
Oh, shoot. I should have brought these up on the meeting. I also I purchased this, which is like the best, it's what kind of started the preservation movement.
So cool.
So I bought that online. If you guys wanna borrow it, you guys are more than welcome to borrow it.
Have
It's
you
my
already looked
personal-
at it? What's
I've
that?
looked at it. This is also just like a, kind of just like introduction to history principles and factors.
Yeah, I think I'll go walk
It was
down.
just $2, but this one here is like, that has the whole Lady Bird Johnson thing in it about historic preservation.
Can I borrow, I will bring it,
Yeah.
so we have meetings Monday, we have a work session, so I'll bring it back to you.
Yeah, yeah.
Thanks for the update and reporting.
Yes,
Whoa,
I'm
can you
still-
get out?
Now, I have a question, so,
Yeah.
Okay.
not lick stamps, but you know what I mean, put the labels on,
Yeah,
right?
she wants to come Friday.
Oh, I don't care.
Yeah, she wants to come and help us put the labels on.
Yeah.
Do that together.
Doesn't matter to
Okay.
me.
Oh, I mean, there's a lot of discussion, it's without
Yeah,
being
most-
noticed.
Is that a meeting?
Yes,
That's why I'm
it
like,
is.
I
It
don't
is.
know, man.
If
Can you
this
just
way.
put the notice out that we can have
Or can
a
she
work
just-
session to put
I
the
was
labels on?
hoping-
We could just
Right.
have this.
Well, I would be happy if you guys wanted to do it, cause I have a
Yeah,
full week.
it doesn't matter.
No.
Can you do it?
Yes, we
Can you do
Yeah.
it? Just help me put the labels on
It
the.
was good to chat, yeah.
If two of us do it, it's
Yeah,
not-
I- like I said, I'm doing the.
And you don't review first.
And
I
I know
just
you
don't wanna get us in trouble.
No, if you guys wanna go, that would be great.
On Monday and do more of a
Here.
tour if that